Hi, I'm Maiya Wagner. I'm from Montrose High School, and I did chemistry this summer at the Engel Lab at the Scripps Research Institute. So I'm going to go a little bit into what the Engel Lab does. I worked with my mentors, Kiri Engel, who Sarah talked a little bit about, and my main day-to-day mentor was a grad student named Madison Wagner. We shared our first initial and our last name, so that was really funny. The main goal of the Engel Lab was called molecular complexity through catalysis, which just means that everybody was working on making new catalysts and better reactions. My project was called Transient Directing Group Enabled Alkyne Difunctionalization to Yield Tetraphenylethylene Derivatives, which is an insane mouthful, but that's okay, we're going to talk about it. So these tetraphenylethylene derivatives are tetra-arylated alkenes. So you can see these four aryl groups, which are comprised of mostly carbon and hydrogen, around this alkene, which is a carbon-carbon double bond in the center. So we care about this TPE because when it's in solution, essentially all of these aryl groups can rotate around their bonds, but when it's in a solid state, they can't rotate. And so all of that energy that would go into rotating essentially creates a glowing substance that looks like this. And so by creating a lot of these derivatives or these slightly altered variations of the compound, we can control the color, the brightness, and other properties. We also care about this because in the real world, we can use it for bacteria imaging, we can use it for cancer diagnostics, and even cell destruction is in here, molecular motors, and even some OLED screens. So the first part of my job was to synthesize starting materials or just make the materials that we would use in the reactions that we're making in the future. A lot of these were the Sonogashira reactions, which use palladium and copper catalysts to yield our starting materials. We would add all of the reactants, put them in nitrogen, stir them overnight, and then quench, filter, evaporate them down, and then purify them. We could check the purity with an NMR, and I'll also talk about that a little bit later. The second part of my job was making the actual reactions that glow, as we saw earlier. These were called alkyne difunctionalization, which is putting two functional groups around an alkyne bond, which is similar to the alkene, but it just has a triple bond instead of a double bond. It was a very similar process, except for we would use a prep plate, which is a sheet of glass with a silica layer on top that we could just use to separate all of the compounds by polarity. And we could also check this with an NMR. These NMRs are used to look at the compound. It stands for nuclear magnetic resonance, and it just shows you where all of the hydrogens are on the compound so you can see how many there are, where there are, and if you have the right compound. These are some of the photos in the lab, just doing extractions. That's my favorite glowy compound that I made, and on the far right, that's me and my mentor. In San Diego, you've heard a lot about this already from the 4 other people that were there, but I lived with my 4 lovely roommates, Lana, Azari, Rain, and Shiloh, and we all carpooled to work, living with our host mom, Jenny. We also were outside of the internship going to beaches. We went to the weekend concert and just had a lot of fun together. And some advice for future interns. Something that really surprised me was how different the weather was. For Southern California, everybody expects it to be really sunny, and it was surprisingly cloudy. And it was not bad at all. It was just very surprising. And if I had any advice for future Pinterns, I would just say don't be afraid to not know everything because you're only a high schooler and they know that you're a high schooler. And take every opportunity you are given because 6 weeks feels so much shorter than it sounds. And so just soak up every single minute that you get with your mentors. So thank you to all of these people.
Thank you.